Mr. President, I want to say hello to my good friend from Delaware. He made some very, very good comments, and I want to follow up and talk about this debate that we're having. Senator from Tennessee, Senator Corker, talked about the need to forget about whether you're Republican or Democrat and think what's best for the country, and that's really what we should be doing right now. People around the country understand that we have a serious debt problem. Spending has been run up under Republicans and Democrats. People can blame whichever party they want, but the reality is now we have a $14 trillion national debt. This year alone, $1.6 trillion is how much more we're going to spend than we take in. That's 40 cents, or a little over 40 cents, out of every dollar that we take in or that we're spending this year, we're borrowing from countries like China. That's such a dangerous thing to do because you're now dependent on other countries and your economy is on very, very shaky grounds. Everyone in this body understands that this is completely unsustainable. Let's just look at the path that the president has set us on as far as his budget is concerned. If we took up his budget, this year alone, we'll spend about $250 billion in interest on our national debt. It's kind of like having a credit card. You're spending $250 billion on an interest on that credit card. Well, if we follow the president's plan over the next 10 years, that $250 billion will go to almost $900 billion a year. That's more than Social Security. That's more than Medicare. That's more than national defense. That's why this is completely unsustainable. So now we're in a debate over a few billion dollars compared to trillions of dollars. It's really a drop in the bucket. That's why I believe that it's really important for both sides to get this behind us so that we can focus on the much larger issues. I have a 100% pro-life voting record. I believe very strongly that life is precious, that God created each of us in His image, and that life should be protected. But we have to face reality. The Democrats are in control of the Senate, in control of the White House, and there's no way that they're going to allow Planned Parenthood, which is the largest abortion provider in the United States. I disagree with what they do, but the Democrats will never allow us to defund Planned Parenthood while they're in charge. So we have to just look at what we can do, what is achievable. And right now, I think one of the biggest moral issues that we face in this country is the debt. Because what we're doing to our children, our grandchildren, is we're handing them a country that they cannot afford. The taxes will have to be too high, that we could default on our debt and we could end up with a depression that's worse than the Great Depression. Simply because this body, the body on the other side of the Capitol and the White House, have spent too much money for too long. We spent money that we do not have. Well, next year's budget and the debt ceiling are much bigger issues than what we're dealing with here. So we don't need to shut down the government. We just need to sit down, make the compromises that are necessary so that we can move this process forward so we can get to the much larger issues on spending and debt. You've seen in the news that Portugal, Greece, Ireland, they've had serious problems. They actually have had their debt downgraded to almost junk status. One of the countries is actually considered junk bond status. The others are now have had their bonds seriously downgraded. Well, what does that mean? That means that they're paying higher interest rates. Well, yesterday, the EU just raised their interest rates. The European Union raised their interest rates because of fears of inflation. Here in the United States, our Federal Reserve is keeping interest rates low, but we know inflation is coming, and eventually they're going to have to raise interest rates because of inflation and overspending by the United States. Well, what does a rise in interest rates mean to the average American? It means that home mortgage is going to go up. And remember, a lot of Americans have these adjustable rate mortgages. So the next time they refinance those mortgages, their payments will be higher. They're already having trouble meeting these payments. What does that mean to job creation? That person, that small business owner that wants to get a loan is going to have to pay higher interest rates. Well, that affects the cost of capital and whether they may be able to get into starting a business in the first place. So it's going to hurt job creations right in the middle of this very delicate little bit of job recovery that we're having in the United States. So this spending is not some esoteric argument. And the debt, it is real. It affects real people's lives. And it isn't something that we can put off for another 3, 4, 5 years. We must deal with it now. We know that entitlements are the biggest part of the budget. Yes, discretionary is important. You have to deal with discretionary. You have to deal with defense. We overspend in defense in so many wasteful programs. But the big issue is really going to be entitlement spending. Congressman Ryan put out a very bold budget the other day, the first person really to come forward with a bold proposal to deal with entitlement spending in the country. The President's Debt Commission put out a proposal. The President unfortunately ignored his own debt commission and didn't put any of the recommendations in his budget. But both Republicans and Democrats are going to have to deal with this spending problem, this spending binge that we've been on. Otherwise, we are not going to have the same United States of America that we've all been enjoying our entire lives. We are literally going to become an economy that cannot exist the way that we exist today because we cannot afford it. Our debt will literally collapse the economy of the United States. There was a recent study that just came out by two incredible economists, Rogoff and Reinhardt. This is a well-respected study by both sides of the aisle. And their study, what they did is they studied sovereign debt over the last 200 years of about 64 countries. And what they found is anytime your debt reaches 90% of your economy or 90% of your GDP, when that happens, it will cause a net decrease of about 30% of your economic growth going forward. Well, those are numbers. What does it mean? It means a loss of jobs. In the United States, over 1 million jobs will be lost that would otherwise be created. This is real stuff. Well, where are we in the United States? Currently, we're about 94% of GDP. So we're already there. And it's going to get worse and worse. And that's why this debate that we're having over spending is so critical that we get it under control and we forget about which party's going to have political advantage. I'm one of those senators, there's quite a few of us who are not running for re-election. Well, everybody in this body needs to forget about whether they get re-elected and do what's right for the country. It is so critical right now that we put our country first. Now, the House Republicans have sent over a proposal that would do a couple of things. One is it would fund the troops. Let's don't let our military come to work and not get paid. That would be ridiculous. So let's at least fund the troops, pass this 1 week spending proposal that would fund the government. It does cut $12 billion out. The only rider in there that's significant is the D.C. abortion rider that says that D.C. can have funds to provide abortions. This is something that was in law that President Obama signed into law in a bill that many Democrats on the other side have signed. So it should not be that controversial. In the meantime, since we have agreed on the spending number, we can work out some of these other things that are controversial in the next week. I believe that that's the right thing to do so that we can keep the government open, so people can continue to get their paychecks, so people can continue to visit national parks, and on and on and on. We all know that the problem is if the government shuts down. So, Mr. President, I think it's critical that let's start doing what's right for the country instead of just what's right for somebody's re-election. Let's sit down and make the serious, tough choices so that we can put this country on the right path. Mr. President, I yield the floor.